The year was 1813. Mecklenburg County in North Carolina. A high school kid wanted to go to college. Had his heart set on the University of Tennessee. Might even do pre-law. Family didn't have money. So he approached the biggest farmer in Mecklenburg County, said, listen, I will work day and night for you. I won't sleep. I will do anything you ask. All I'm looking is to raise some money so I can go to school, get a degree. And the farmer agreed. He liked this young man. He liked the guts, the moxie of this young man. He hired him. He said, you're going to sleep in the loft, in the barn, and you're going to do your work every day. And I expect you to work hard. I expect you to work honestly, but I expect you to work. And the kid worked day and night, more than the farmer expected. Farmer loved him. But a problem was happening, and the farmer didn't see it. Farmer had a beautiful young daughter who fell in love with him, and he fell in love with her. And as that love grew, they decided at some point that summer, they're going to approach dear old dad and tell him the truth. And you might imagine, well, dear old dad was very happy about this and very pleased. No, that is not what happened. Because when they came to dear old dad, he went ballistic. He wasn't angry, he was ballistic. And he started yelling, you don't have a future. You don't have a family with money. You've got nothing. In fact, I don't think you're going to amount to anything in life. Get the hell off my property. Wow. And as this young man walked away, everyone in this room knows what was going on in his head. Yes? You hick. You disgusting cockroach spawned from Satan's seed. You lower than moose bile on the food chain, imbecile. I am going to show you, and nothing's going to stop me. You see, when he went to that farm, he wanted success. As he walked away from that farm, he had to have it. 32 years later, the now very old farmer decided to take down that old barn. And as he was dismantling the barn and he got to the hayloft, he was aghast. That outrageous young man he threw off his property carved his name in a wood block in the hayloft. The year was 1845. One can only imagine the look on that farmer's face when he read the name James K. Polk. You see, the boy who would amount to nothing in 1845 was serving his first year as the President of the United States. You don't get in life what you want. You get in life what you have to have. Which brings me to my last speaker. And this one I'm going to really enjoy. I met Collin Slattery when his mom brought him here when he was 16 years old. And what flabbergasted me is at 16 years of age, he got it. He understood what was going on. Not only that, he kept coming back. And by the time he was in his early 20s, barely out of his teens, he started a social media company. And in a few years, he made a major success and a major name for himself in social media. I was proud of him. He took some of the lessons, but most importantly, he had the courage to go and do it. But as I spoke with Collin through the years, I noticed a theme. I want to make a difference in the world. I want my life to mean something. I want to make the kind of difference where people will remember me long after I'm gone. And as an entrepreneur, I don't think I can do it. You know, when you have that kind of noble intent, and your role in life you see outside of your own selfish self-interest to go out there and make the world a better place, boy, are you going to accomplish something outstanding in life. He's not even 30 years of age. The paperwork is already filed. And here at the round table, he is launching his candidacy, and he will tell you all about it. If I sound like I'm proud of him, because I am. because he's going to show you right now you do not get in life what you want. You get out of life what you have to have. Collin Slattery.
All right, so thank you, Stephen, for the introduction. My name is Collin Slattery, and I'm running for mayor of New York City. I've been in New York since 2003. I moved here with my mother and 2 sisters, and I'm a nerd. I've always been a nerd. As Stephen had mentioned, I was coming here as a teenager and loving every minute of it. And I graduated from Stuyvesant here in New York in 2007. And I've never left the city. I wasn't able to go to college because I could not afford to go to college. And as many of you probably remember, the economy was not great in 2008 and 2009. And in 2009, on December 23rd, with $134 to my name, I started a business. And today, this year, we will exceed $100,000 in monthly recurring revenue. I'm also running for mayor of New York City. And I'm running because I have to. I'm running because I must run. I feel an obligation to run. We are in extraordinary times, and we need extraordinary leaders to take us through these times. And I believe that I can be one of those people. I don't want to run. I have to run. And for the rest of my life, if I don't, I will regret not doing it. It is a must for me to run and do what I can to make a difference. And I have personal experience. In 2009, I was making $8.25 an hour, working at a bakery. I struggled to make ends meet. I paid $175 a week in cash for a really shitty apartment. I was hungry. I often could not afford to eat. At my lowest point, I weighed 155 pounds. And I'm a 200-pound man, so you can imagine what I looked like at that point. I couldn't afford to come home from work on the subway. I could not afford the subway fare. So there were days where I would walk 9.1 miles from my job in the West Village to my shitty apartment in Washington Heights. It took me 3 hours to walk home. So I understand what it's like to struggle here. I'm also running because millennials don't have a voice. We're 31% of the electorate and 1% of Congress. 1%. We lack representation. And we have big problems. The big problems of the future are going to be borne on our shoulders. Climate change, we will have to fix that. Our crumbling infrastructure in this country, that burden will be on our shoulders. The massive debt that is going to grow as this population ages is going to be on our shoulders. And we don't have leaders to lead us into the future. I can be the tip of that spear. I will be the tip of that spear. And I will lead the millennials to much greater political representation. I'm also running to build a better New York. I love New York. New York is my home. New York will always be my home. It is the greatest city in the world, but it has problems. It has big problems. Homelessness is near record highs. Transit costs are at record highs. And cost of housing, record highs. 1.8 million New Yorkers live in poverty. That would be the 5th largest city in the country if the people in poverty were one city. The 5th largest city, right behind Houston. Think about that. I'm not looking to be a politician. I'm a citizen. I see problems that need fixing, and I believe that we need to fix them. I'm not aspiring for higher office or to further my political aspirations. I want to fix the problems. And there are a lot of problems, and there are a few that are very easy to fix. I work in tech, and it's always said that the best ideas are the ones that, once they're fixed, everyone looks around and says, why the hell didn't anyone think of that sooner? And we have those in politics as well. And we don't have the nerds who are willing to look at it the way we do in tech, in politics. And so I want to go over 3 things here today that I think are very, very important, and 2 of which are very easy to fix. Decriminalizing fare evasion, half-fare Metro cards, and dedicated funding to improve the subway here in the city. So, decriminalizing fare evasion. Fare evasion, you're jumping the turnstile. And it is the single most common arrest here in New York City. 29,000 people were arrested for fare evasion in 2015, and an additional 130,000 received summonses for being poor and unable to afford $2.75 to get to work, to get to a medical appointment, to go to student-teacher conference. This is a crime that 92% of the people who are affected by it are low-income people of color. These are not hardened criminals. These are people who just can't afford the high cost of transit. And the fine is $100. And if they can't afford $2.75, they can't afford $100. And so even if they wanted to pay, now they have warrants out for their arrest. And it doesn't just hurt these individuals, these families. 50% of these people who are arrested and tried are convicted, which gives them permanent criminal records for not being able to pay $2.75. That limits their employment opportunities. That limits their housing opportunities. That limits the potential to get public benefits, all for being poor. But it costs the rest of us as well. The average misdemeanor prosecution in New York City costs $1,750, which in 2015 resulted in $51 million in expenses for fare evasion alone on prosecutions. Why are we doing this? We shouldn't be doing this, and it's an easy thing to change. And along with that, we should be offering these people half-price Metro cards. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the transit fare. I've walked 9.1 miles home. Think about that. 3 hours to get home from your job, walking. 28% of low-income New Yorkers have not been able to afford transit fare in the last year. 28%. But we can fix that. 800,000 people would be eligible for a half-fare Metro card if it only applied to the federal poverty level, which for a family of 3 is $20,000. Can you imagine having a family of 3 here in New York City living on $20,000 a year? For an individual, that's $11,000 a year. If we doubled it to 200% of the federal poverty level, 1.8 million people would be eligible for this program, which would in average save them $700 a year. Now I know most people in this room, $700 does not sound like a lot of money, but when you are poor, every dollar is huge. $700 is medical treatment. It's new shoes for your son so he's not walking around with holes in his feet. It's maybe taking your kids to a movie. Every dollar is massively important. And this program would cost very, very little money. And that's the crazy part. At full uptake at 100% of the poverty level, $200 million a year. That's less than 1/2 of 1% of the city's tax revenue. To put that in perspective, we're spending about $184 million a year on security at Trump Tower alone. And with all of these new riders that we have with our half-fare program, we'll need to improve the MTA, improve the subway system. And I don't know how many of you are New Yorkers or spend a lot of time on the subway, but if you're like me, you know it's gotten bad. The subway continues to get worse. It's overcrowded. It's slow. There are lots of delays. The ridership today is 62% higher than it was in 1991, and it's at the same levels that it was at in the late 1940s. Overcrowding delays have gone up 300% since 2012 alone. A 300% increase in delays due to overcrowding. But there are ways to fix this. There's one easy way to fix this, and it's a signal system called CBTC, Communication-Based Train Control. And it's used on subway systems and transit systems around the world, modern systems, to increase capacity, improve reliability, and make the system better. But it costs money. And many of you probably realize that lots of bureaucracies are not good at spending money appropriately. But we have systems here in New York, so certain lines already have this in place. And they've seen 30% increases in capacity. But it needs to be expanded to the whole system. And we can do that, it just requires money. And we can raise money with one dedicated funding goal, which is implementing the CBTC system on the rest of the subway system. Not moving the money into the general MTA bureaucracy, which should be fixed. Just funding dedicated for this single purpose, which will improve the lives of the 6 million people who take the subway every single day. And I have some important numbers, which we now don't have. 1.9 million. That's the number of millennials here in New York City. It's a lot of people. 1.26 of them are Democrats. Here's another number. 282,344. That is the number of votes that Bill de Blasio got in the Democratic primary in 2013. If 23% of millennials voted for me in the Democratic primary, I would be the Democratic nominee for mayor here in New York City. 10.6 million. That's the amount of private capital that Bill de Blasio raised. It's a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to run for mayor here in this city. And the hardest and most important number is 20,000. That's the number of signatures that I will need to get on the ballot for the Democratic primary. The actual number is 7,500, but because of discounting ballots and to avoid long and expensive court fights, it is recommended that you get 20,000 signatures to get on the ballot. And you have 35 days in which to do it. And how can I win? It's a question I get all the time when I talk about my campaign. People look at me like I'm crazy, but it's only crazy until you do it, and they start to talk to me, and they listen to what I have to say, and they think, maybe he can do it. And I can win in a number of ways. Enthusiasm. No one's excited about Bill de Blasio. No one's excited about another old white guy running for political office, someone who does not represent them, does not look like them. And the energy is with young people. It's the people marching in the streets and donating record sums to the ACLU. People want to want something. People will want to support me, want to vote for me, want to donate money. They will want to volunteer. And that enthusiasm will help me overcome the obstacles that are already in place. An entrenched party system that will do nothing to support me. A political system that is designed to keep the same people in office over and over and over and prevent people who have good ideas and are idealistic from running and getting elected. I think I will also get lots of free media. I feel like I have a very good story. I'm young. I'm an exciting person to put on television and write about in newspapers, and so I will earn lots of free media that most other candidates would have to pay for. And the election, I think, will be nationalized. Millennials across the country, progressives across the country, people across the country want something. They want to vote, and they will want to support me. So it won't just be New York City millennials who are voting for me. It will be people across the country who will want to vote or donate or volunteer. It will be a national election in a local district. And finally, I need help, because I am only one man. And the most important way that I need help is I need money. And this is not your traditional return on investment that you would find, but ideally I would like to raise $10,000 in donations for my campaign here today, because running for mayor is expensive. But the good news is that I have specific advantages over other people who are initially starting their campaigns, so my money goes much further. I run a digital marketing agency. That is my business, and as has been demonstrated by recent campaigns, everything is shifting to digital, it's shifting to social, and instead of having to pay a marketing consultant $30,000 a month, I just have to do the labor myself. And so money goes much further for me than it would for other campaigns. I need contacts. I'm young, my network is not as robust as I'm sure all of you here in the room have. Press contacts, election attorneys, people who have run for office or are in office. These are the kinds of people that I need to meet and get in touch with and be put in front of. Press is going to be the hardest part initially, because no one thinks I'm serious. People look at me and they're like, oh, you're 28, you've never run for office before, you couldn't possibly be serious. There's no way you can win. And so that initial press is going to be the hardest part for me. But I assure you, I am serious and I can win. I need social media help. I need people to follow me on social media. That is how you get your message out to a broad group of people. The president has 30 million followers on Twitter. That is a huge audience that he can reach directly. And that is how we are going forward in politics, reaching people directly and sharing that information directly. And so I need more people to follow me on social media and share my information, share my campaign, share what I am trying to do for New York City with a broader audience. I think together we can build a better New York for all New Yorkers.
The year was 1983. I was younger than Collin. And I was called to Atlanta, Georgia to speak. What a thrill. One of the first times I was ever called to publicly speak. And I went there, an audience of about 300 people, started to deliver my speech, and I noticed the guy next to me also giving his speech, where the walls were very thin, was about the same timing as mine. And every time there was a lull as I spoke, I heard that son of a bitch giving his speech. And I'm sure every time there was a lull there, he heard me. It was becoming a real pain in the ass. But I spoke for about 20 minutes. And actually the fellow next to me also spoke for about 20 minutes. And as the meetings came to an end, I could hear him wrapping up, he can hear me wrapping up, And I thought, you know, I'm going to end up in the hallway about the same time as this guy. Maybe I'll punch his lights out. So when I got to the hallway, and sure enough, he was walking out of his room. The man was about 87, 88 years of age, so there went that theory. But I started talking with him, and he started talking to me. We were walking to the carport together. Maybe a 5-minute walk. And everyone knows how this conversation started out. Boy, I expected the weather in Atlanta in June to be warmer than it is today, and he agreed with that. Just light, ridiculous, nonsense talk. And it's also amazing how heavy the conversation can change in a 5-minute period of time. Because I had a feeling this guy was somebody special. I can't tell you why. Maybe real special people have an aura about them. He had an aura about him. And in my usual tactless way, I said, "Who the hell are you?" And he said, "Buckminster Fuller." I want a show of hands. Who knows the name Buckminster Fuller? That's it. Less than half the people here know Bucky Fuller. Bucky Fuller is one of the greatest inventors of the 20th century. He was one of the greatest architects of the 20th century. He was one of the greatest scientists of the 20th century. The geodesic dome was invented by Bucky Fuller. He was one of the greatest teachers of the 20th century. He was the head of Mensa in the 20th century. And 1 out of 5 people know who he is? Shame on all of you! I knew who he was. And I said to myself as I was walking down with Buckminster Fuller, holy Christ, I'm walking with one of the greatest minds of the 20th century. And that conversation started changing quick and getting much heavier. When we got to the carport, I asked him, "Would you like to do dinner?" After all, I could have dinner with Bucky Fuller. Holy Christ. He said to me he would love to, but that evening he was flying to LA. You see, his wife Annie was very sick and in a hospital in LA. And then he smiled at me, and I'll never forget. It was a very, very funny smile. And he said, "You know, when we were married 66 years ago, I made a promise to her. I promised I would be the first to die, so that when she got to heaven, when she got to the gates, I would be there waiting. So I'm flying to LA right now, just in case." And as I walked away from that carport, I thought, only God determines when somebody lives or dies. What kind of ridiculous promise was that to make? And as I walked away, I said, you know, I always keep my promises. And I thought, what are you going to do, commit suicide? It's crazy. Those were not the days of the internet. Those were the days where you got your news from Associated News and other bizarre means. It was 2 weeks later that I actually discovered what happened. He did fly to LA that night. His wife Annie was very ill. She was dying of cancer. When he arrived at the hospital, they told her she had hours left to live. And my new friend walked into the bedroom where she was lying, crawled in bed with his wife of 66 years, took her hand, took a deep breath, and he died. You say impossible? You didn't know Bucky Fuller. When I read it, it was a very simple response on my part. Promises made, promises kept. Well done, my new friend. You don't get in life what you want. You get out of life what you have to have. Thank you.